Meteorophobia. Every day, it claims the hopes and dreams of countless audio engineers and musicians. Symptoms include nightmares of EQ curves, feelings of impending disaster, extreme aversion to red lights, constant need of validation from others, and obsession with audio measuring tools. Meteorophobia is a serious condition that results in dull, lifeless mixes and corresponds to sudden outbursts of frustration or being grumpy around friends and family for no reason. To donate to the Meteorophobia Support Foundation, please sign up at...
Do you constantly check frequency analyzers and loudness meters to make sure your mix looks like someone else's? Have you ever had that feeling like something bad is going to happen if you push the limits in your mix? You know, you're in the zone mixing and you crank that EQ or compressor, but then come back a few minutes later to back it off to something more reasonable. I love mixing in the box, but I think the mixers in the analog days had a big advantage by not having a screen. If you were to use a console or outboard gear, you wouldn't have an EQ curve to look at, and you wouldn't be trying to move the knobs by 0.1 dB increments. Without all the visual feedback, you'd be forced to simply rely on your ears as you twist knobs and push faders. Using your ears to make decisions about sounds. Seems pretty smart. Yet in the digital world with DAWs and plugins, it takes a superhuman effort not to start mixing with your eyes. And when you start mixing with your eyes, your mix is doomed to mediocrity because you start playing it safe and you stop serving the song. Now, there's been a recent trend of rule making in the online tutorial world, and because most online creators simply just copy what's popular, these made-up rules can start to look like scientific fact. You know what I'm talking about. Rules like, don't boost more than 3 dB, or don't boost at all, only use subtractive EQ. Gain stage all your tracks to -18. Don't mess up your sounds with compression, use automation instead. Hey, some of this advice might be good for absolute beginners. It's kind of like how I make my kids wear a life jacket in the pool so they don't drown. But can we all just step back a minute and take a hard look at this? Should we really be so afraid of red lights and lines and numbers on a screen? Especially in the digital world where everything can be undone with a click. Why do we act like something bad might happen if we break one of these imaginary rules? Don't you think it's time to take off the life jacket and learn to swim in the deep end? The engineers I've helped train have realized how they've been keeping their mixes flat and boring for no reason, and finally freed themselves of these imaginary barriers. The top mixers in the world don't pay attention to any of these rules, and if you want your mixes to jump out of the speakers, you shouldn't either. Let me show you why. So let's just check out what following some of these EQ rules would do to a drum mix. So listen to this first. So there's a drum mix for you. These are all live drums, not programmed drums, but let's look at the live kick track. So this isn't very extreme really, but we've definitely gone far above the 3 dB rule, especially boosting the top end at 8K on this kick drum. Let's just bypass this SSL EQ plugin. So that obviously makes a big difference right there. And we've got another boost around 2.5K, 4 dB, huge cut at, let's see, what is this? 250 Hertz, huge cut, -12 dB, and then another boost on the low end here. So obviously that's making a huge difference on the kick. Now let's check out the snare. So there's the snare top. And look at the boost we've got on here, 9 dB at 8K, another 5 dB at around 4K, another little boost here around 2.5, and 7 dB at 200 Hertz. So, you know, a fair amount of boosting happening on the EQ. But listen to the difference. We'll bypass it. I mean, it essentially doesn't even sound like a competitive recorded snare drum until we have these boosts. And then we've got the snare bottom mic, which we've maxed out the EQ boost here, 15 dB at 8K. And that's just to add some more sizzle to the snare top here and blend in. So here's why it's so dangerous to follow these rules or think that you're not allowed to boost like this. Like if we just take this kick drum, let's just put everything down to 3 dB, since that would be the most we're allowed to boost. Even if we leave the big cut, that's fine. So there's the kick. Here's what that sounds like.
Then let's go to our snare and let's tame that back to 3 dB on everything. Snare bottom. Now let's listen to the drum mix. It sounds like there's a blanket over the speakers now. But if we can go back and bring our original EQ moves back here and snare bottom, snare top, and kick. Here's the snare top again. And here it is in the whole mix. So you can hear that comparison of following these conservative EQ rules, these guidelines. They really kill your mix and make it really dull, make it sound like there's a blanket over your speakers, and it's no wonder that your mix won't sound exciting. It won't have the punch and impact that pro mixes have. And I want to show you one other important comparison here on the vocals, and not even on the heaviest vocals in this song, but let's check out this really soft section here.
Save me from all the pressure, it haunts me as the time makes its way to the fine.
So let's check out the EQ first, and then we'll back everything off to where it's really mellow with kind of the conservative, playing it safe mix moves, and then we'll go back to what I ended up with in this mix. So you can see at 8K, again, we're doing a 9 dB boost to get this really nice airy vocal, but let's back this off.
Save me from all the pressure, it haunts me
And with this
as
one
the
around
time
4.5.
makes its way to the finite end of this.
Now look at our compressor. Even though this is a pretty mellow part, it's working pretty hard.
Save me from all the pressure.
But let's say we followed some of the popular advice out there and just didn't do this compression and just relied on our automation instead. We've got some other plugins here, saturation, de-esser, but let's just leave those for now. Let's just see the difference of these EQ moves and then less compression, what this sounds like.
Save me from all the pressure, it haunts me as the time makes its way to the finite end of.
Man, that sounds really dull and boring. Let's bring our top end EQ back at least.
Save me from all the pressure, it haunts me as the time makes its way to the finite end of.
Okay, that's better. That's more exciting. But listen to what the compressor does. And I want you to listen to the energy and the character and thickness of the vocal. This is not about just controlling the levels. I can always do that with automation. This is about bringing out energy and clarity and really feeling from the vocalist.
Save me from all the pressure, it haunts me as the time makes its way to the finite end of this. Get it away from me now.
Let's A-B this little section again.
As the time makes its way to the finite end of this. As the time makes its way to the finite end of this.
Man, it just sounds like he's singing with so much more passion and energy and character, and that's because the compressor is pulling all of that out of it. It's really squeezing every ounce of character that we can get out of the vocal, and this is even a pretty mellow section of the song. You know, if we look at the regular chorus, we're doing even more compression on that.
Won't you save me from all the pressure, it haunts me as the time makes its way to the finite end of this.
So those are just a couple examples of how not being shy with EQ or compression is what really makes a mix pop out of the speakers. Instead of worrying about carving out frequencies so your bass and kick don't overlap, how about just doing what sounds good, even if you end up boosting the same frequency on both? It's okay for things to overlap and blend. It's called mixing after all, and if you don't feel like you have that glue holding your mixes together, you might be getting too surgical
trying to do math instead of music. And don't be fooled by the hype around expensive monitors or worry too much about the room you're mixing in. After all, the people listening to your final product are in cars, in the kitchen, or listening on earbuds in a noisy space. Mixing in an imperfect room with unflattering speakers is actually going to help your mix translate better. That's why Joey Sturgis was able to record chart-topping records in a living room with no treatment. That's why Zach Cervini said that he was able to switch from mixing on studio monitors his whole life to learning how to get his best mixes ever with a laptop and headphones at home. I found this out firsthand when I moved from a treated studio into a spare bedroom at home and had clients telling me I was doing my best work yet. Expert mixing is all about serving the song, and you can't do that if you're a slave to the tools. You have my permission to crank that EQ, pin that compressor, let that red light come on once in a while if it sounds good, but you never even needed my permission in the first place. And as you've already realized, you shouldn't be reinventing the entire production at mix time. If your raw tracks already sound 80% there, then the mix is all about enhancing the song to add extra punch, clarity, and excitement. Now that sounds a lot more fun, right? After you finish the last couple episodes here, I challenge you to do your next mix without any limits and without any fear of doing something wrong. Make it exciting, be bold, push it to the edge, because you can always bring it back. In fact, that's the best way to find the sweet spot. All right, we've covered a lot of ground in the past 5 episodes, so feel free to go back and watch this all again to make sure these lessons sink in. But now that we've adopted a new professional outlook on tracking, editing, and mixing, and destroyed the imaginary barriers holding you back, there's only one thing missing: the final ingredient that will turn you into a sought-after producer with artists lining up to work with you. In fact, without this final ingredient, your career will flounder no matter how much knowledge or skill you have. Luckily, it's something that you can start using to your advantage immediately after you watch the next episode.